We'd like to recognize Chairman Crenshaw to present the 017 Financial Services Funding Bill. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to everyone as well. Today we're considering the fiscal year 2017 Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Bill. As you know, this bill funds a diverse group of agencies and activities, including financial regulators, tax collection, the White House, the federal courts, the District of Columbia, General Service Administration, and the Small Business Administration, just to name a few. And so this bill is the product of 8 hearings and 1,800 requests from members on both sides of the aisle. The bill provides $21.7 billion in discretionary funding. That's $1.5 billion or 6.5% less than fiscal year 2016, and it's $2.7 billion or 11% below the request. The subcommittee's allocation is a significant reduction from 2016. Nevertheless, the allocation is sufficient to fund the vital federal programs as well as a one-time set-aside for the expenses of the presidential transition. Law enforcement and the administration of justice are among the bill's priorities. Funding for the high-intensity drug trafficking areas and drug-free communities programs are funded at all-time record highs. The Treasury's Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, they're the folks that enforce our sanction program, are funded at all-time highs. In addition, there's a healthy amount of funding for both the federal and the D.C. judicial branches of government and for the supervision of offenders and defendants that live in our communities. Another priority for the bill is supporting small businesses. They're the folks that grow the economy. They're the folks that create jobs. The bill provides $157 million for SBA's loan programs. That supports $28.5 billion in 7A lending and $7.5 billion in what's known as 504 lending. The bill also provides record high amounts of funding for the SBA grant program, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax Trade Bureau, the Treasury's Community Development Financial Institutions Fund program, and that includes, for the first time, a set-aside for the CDFIs that work with individuals with disabilities to overcome financial barriers. Now, in order to fund these programs at these levels, we had to reduce funding elsewhere. We cut funding for nearly 24 agencies and programs. They can operate with a little bit less, like the Office of Management and Budget and like the Federal Communications Commission. The brunt of the reduction, however, is borne by the General Service Administration and the Internal Revenue Service. These are the largest agencies in the bill, and they both have a recent history of inappropriate behavior. Now, while the bill reduces GSA funding for new construction by $1.1 billion, we provide a sizable amount for repair and alterations. And also, we continue to push the GSA to develop an accurate inventory of the federal property, and we designate funding for the GSA to use existing space a little more efficiently, a little more effectively. Now, it's been 3 years and 3 commissioners since we learned that the IRS had betrayed the trust of the American people by applying inappropriate scrutiny to certain groups. Instead of turning over a new leaf, however, the IRS made a series of embarrassing management mistakes at the expense of customer service. So to remedy this, the bill includes numerous provisions to reform the IRS, reduces their funding by $236 million below the current level, and within the total for IRS, however, we set aside $290 million to make sure that they're spending that money on customer service, on cybersecurity, and on fraud prevention. Now, to increase transparency and oversight of the agencies, the bill makes the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Office of Financial Research subject to the appropriations process. It changes the CFPB's leadership from a single director to a 5-member commission. And it requires the Federal Communications Commission to make orders publicly available for 21 days before the commission votes on them. Now, to prevent agency overreach, the bill gives businesses the opportunity to change their operations prior to being designated as a systemically important financial institution. It prohibits the CFPB from outlawing pre-dispute arbitration It requires certain court challenges to be resolved before the FCC implements the net neutrality order, and it prohibits the FCC from regulating broadband rates. In addition, this committee has strong concerns that the FCC seems to be prolonging their pattern of regulatory overreach with the recent set-top box proposal. And so we include language that requires the FCC to stop, study this controversial rule before they move any further. The telecommunications industry is more competitive than ever, and yet the Commission has been more active than ever in trying to exert regulatory control over market innovation. And so to return the FCC's focus toward mission-critical work and away from politically charged rulemaking, this bill requires the FCC to do less, with less. To give the low-income families the option of selecting a school that best meets the educational needs of their children, the bill includes the text of the Scholarships for Opportunity and Results Act, the so-called SOARS Act, that passed the House last month. The bill also includes two other bills that have passed the House this year. Number one, to adapt the bankruptcy code for the large financial institutions, and it establishes a small business advocate within the Securities and Exchange Commission. So let me thank all the members of the subcommittee for their input into the bill, thank them for their participation in our hearings this year. I especially want to thank Mr. Ridgell, who is going to be, like me, leaving this esteemed body at the end of the year. And I want to thank Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Lowy for their leadership in supporting and advancing this bill. And I certainly want to thank our staff. But in conclusion, let me thank the Ranking Member, Mr. Serrano. He's in the unique position of having been both the chairman of this subcommittee as well as the subcommittee chairman, and I mean the ranking member. And so I'm sure this is not the bill that he would have written. I don't think he likes everything in it, but I can tell you it's a better law because of his input. He's been a great partner to work with, and I appreciate his advice and counsel. And so now I'd like to yield to him for any comments he might make.